Personnel and Animal Welfare Committee to order. And we will begin with item number 1.
Item number 1, communication from the mayor relative to the appointment of Mr. Jonathan Weiss to the Board of Civil Service Commissioners for the term ending June 30th, 2017.
And if Mr. Weiss would like to come to the front here. I'm not sure I have any tough questions for you, but maybe you could just talk about your background a little bit and what you bring to the position and why you want to do this.
Sure, happy to. Well, I'm a lawyer here in Los Angeles, and I'm an Angelino, born and bred. I grew up in Los Angeles in the Rancho Park area, and then went off to college at UC Berkeley, and then back east for graduate school and law school, and came back to Los Angeles to clerk for a judge on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, after which I started my practice here in LA as a lawyer. I would very much be honored and privileged to serve on the Board of Civil Service Commissioners for a variety of reasons, not least of which is the opportunity to serve a city that I love, but also to be part of the fabric of governance that includes laypersons, so to speak, as part of that process. I think that's very important and would be privileged to be part of that. As far as my competencies or what I think qualifies me for the position, I think generally my legal background would serve me well, particularly when presiding over appeals from administrative hearing determinations on the part of city employees. As I said, I have experience as a clerk on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, but also as a practitioner in that context. While I'm not specifically a labor and employment lawyer per se, I have had considerable experience in that area as a practitioner, and I think those experiences would serve me well in this capacity as well.
Very good. Mr. O'Farrell, any questions?
I have no questions, Mr. Weiss. Thanks.
Well, I do have to say, although any of these positions are intended to bring lay people into the process, I personally think that people should bring some level of qualification to this particular position, and I appreciate the fact that you have a lot of on-target experience, and look forward to seeing you serve in this position. And so if there are no objections, we will support this appointment.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Item number 2.
Item number 2, communication from the mayor relative to the appointment of Ms. Jeanne Fugate to the Board of Civil Service Commissioners for the term ending June 30th, 2015.
Please.
Good afternoon.
Hello. And I wonder if you could answer the same question. Tell us a little bit about your background and why you want to do this.
Well, I'm afraid that Mr. Weiss stole my thunder, as I fear that my background is somewhat similar.
Not a bad thing.
I came out to Los Angeles for Ninth Circuit clerkship and have been practicing at a downtown boutique law firm ever since then. I'm a partner there, and much of my practice actually does involve employment-related activities, both representing employer and employee side cases. So that's sort of the background. I'm also a 5-year resident of Silver Lake, and I'm very pleased to be part of Los Angeles. In terms of why I want to do this position, I feel that public service is something that we all should do, and it's an important thing. And I have been looking for the right way to serve my community. And I think, given my experience, that the Civil Service Commission will be a great way to give back to the community, and I look forward to doing that.
Well, thank you. I think we have 2 very, very on-target appointees who have good opportunities to give back in a way that uses your expertise, so I appreciate that. Mr. O'Farrell, any other comments?
Thanks for making the comment about giving back to public service. It's great. I think it's a high calling as well, so thanks for stepping up. And if you ever need, you're probably a constituent of mine, so if you need assistance, do let us know.
Will do. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, and we will approve your appointment without objection.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 7.
Item number 7, continued from October 16, 2012, Department of Animal Services reports relative to the status report on the operation of the Northeast Valley Animal Shelter by Best Friends Animal Society.
Welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Would you like me to give you a rundown on the report back?
Please.
Okay.
Please do so. Thank you.
As you know, with the passage of Proposition F, the city embarked on a very large building program, including animal shelters. We ended up in the process of doing that, building Northeast Valley Shelter in Council District 7. We couldn't afford to run it. We didn't have enough staff people, so the city approved going out to bid on that particular shelter, and we ended up contracting with Best Friends Animal Society. We executed the contract in January 2012. Later that year, in a report back to this committee, then Councilman Alarcon had, by the way, John Chavez with the Department of Animal Services, Councilman Alarcon had questions about the $3.3 million in services that would be provided under this contract. He believed that that figure was overstated, that because Best Friends does not provide field enforcement, that number was too high. As a result of that, he did ask us, or the committee asked us to go back and look at that $3.3 million in service and report on its validity. We did go back, we checked the CAO analysis and the report on this. That $3.3 million never included field enforcement. It was merely for kennel workers, some medical staff, and also for some clerk typists. So we believe that that number in services is actually accurate. Best Friends states that they actually spend about $4 million per year. And in the report back, we provide you with some additional information on Best Friends' latest statistics. We do have a representative here from Best Friends if you have any questions on what they're doing. Otherwise, I'm here to answer any questions you might have on the report back.
Mr. O'Farrell, would you like to start?
Sure. Thank you. Thanks, John. Just, I'm less concerned about the services in terms of how they're financed. I'm more interested in understanding the differences in terms of the requirements between Best Friends and New Hope. Mm-hmm. And I would love for you to help me understand a few things, and if someone from Best Friends could help answer, that would be great as well. In terms of the price that's paid for an animal when you obtain an animal from a shelter.
Yes.
Is there a price differential between the two nonprofits?
I know we'll be talking a little bit about the New Hope program in a subsequent agenda item. Mm-hmm. The major distinction between Best Friends Animal Society and a New Hope is Best Friends is a contractor. We have an official huge contract with them for 3 years, and they provide services, adoption services, and sterilization services primarily. So they're a private contractor in our system, fully vetted. The New Hope are rescue organizations, 501c3s, that sign an agreement with us, a New Hope agreement. It's just it's not a contract at all. They go into our shelters, and then they typically pay $40 spay and neuter deposit. They can adopt an animal out. They hold that animal, and then they'll adopt it to a final adopter at some point in that particular process. So they don't have an official contract with us. They have an agreement that they sign, and we have about 230 New Hope rescue partners in our system, and they adopt out or pull somewhere in the neighborhood of 6,500 animals a year.
And is the fee waived for Best Friends because they provide the spay and neuter services and all the health services?
Yes.
By contract, is that why New Hope pays a fee and Best Friends doesn't?
That's correct.
Okay. And could you explain the differences between the waiting periods for animals that are newly brought to the shelters? I understand that there's a longer waiting period for New Hope than there is for Best Friends.
I'll let Best Friends answer the latter, but any animal that's brought in on intake, if we find a stray animal, we will keep it for, when we impound it, plus 4 days to give us time to see if there's an owner out there.
It's been
For
alleged,
Best Friends,
it's been alleged
I
that
don't
Best
think
Friends can adopt the same day. Is that accurate, or?
if they can adopt the same day, I don't know. Yes.
Please.
Please.
Hello.
Welcome.
Hello. I'm Candy Crawford. I am the NKLA manager for Best Friends Animal Society. So your question about New Hope policies and as it pertains to Best Friends, technically Best Friends is not a New Hope partner, so we do not have to participate in the New Hope guidelines. However, we have chosen to do so to be fair to the rest of the New Hope partners. So we do wait the same waiting period that the New Hope partners do. There's a new rule in place where adoptable animals, I think it's for small dogs mostly, have to be held through a weekend for adoption before coming available, and we've been abiding by that policy and waiting through the weekend before we pull any animals into our care.
Oh, you have? Okay, and how long have you been following that policy?
Well, that policy is very new. I think it's only been in effect for about a month.
Yeah, a couple of months at the
So
most.
you've been following it since the adoption?
Correct, but
Okay.
we've followed New Hope policies since the beginning.
Okay. Could you explain, it's also been alleged about the outflow of animals even out of state for adoption from Best Friends, which is finding homes wherever they need to be is a great thing, don't get me wrong. But do you track them even out of state? Could you
We do.
explain that?
So just for reference sake, in 2013, I'll give you some statistics. Let's see. Okay. In 2013, we provided 3,570 adoptions of animals we pulled from LA Animal Services and 2,239 transfers of dogs and cats from LA Animal Services. We have about 17 Pup My Ride program partners, which is our transport program. Best Friends started the transport program in about 2006, and we do a full-scale background check on all of our partners before we send animals to them. We analyze the community, first and foremost, of where the pets are going to be going, making sure we don't send the same types of animals that are already in population in that community. And we do follow-up checks on all of the animals, offering a lifetime guarantee should any of them not work out in the Transport Partners program, they come back to us, and we have taken quite a few back. We do follow up. We provide a weekly report back to LA Animal Services, to Maria Gordo, of all outcomes for all animals that we pull from LA Animal Services. If they are transfers, we provide that as well, which program they've been transferred to, and we keep contact with the transport program after the transfer to find out the status of the animal until they're adopted.
Great. And there's a difference of definition between when an animal is adopted and when an animal is rescued. An animal is adopted when it finds a permanent home. Is that the same with both agencies? I'm just looking for the consistency.
Yes.
So in other words, it's not considered adopted until it's placed in a permanent home?
Correct.
Yes.
Not necessarily when it's picked up by the nonprofit?
That's correct.
Okay, and that's consistent. And then lastly, ID numbers of animals. Can you explain when ID numbers are changed, amended, or are they at all?
We don't change the impound numbers from the
Okay.
animals that we rescue. In fact, the PetPoint database system that we use, upon intake, all of the animals have their original city impound number inputted into their profile. PetPoint generates a secondary animal information number just as the sake of PetPoint doing that. When we report our weekly statistics back to LA Animal Services, the original city impound number is used for all of the animals for tracking purposes.
Great. And do the Best Friends animals, do the microchips define that they come from one of the shelters, or do the microchips define that they come from Best Friends?
It depends. Some of the animals that we pull from the city shelters are previously microchipped. It could have been a prior owner, or the city had microchipped them before we pulled. Now that we're really focusing mostly on the red-listed animals, a lot of times we're finding that the animals are microchipped prior to being released to us. If they're not, we microchip them ourselves. All that information is put into their record, and the microchip numbers are provided back to the city, whether or not it was city implanted or we implanted. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And are most animals microchipped, though, that are brought into the shelters? They're microchipped by the local shelter fairly immediately, aren't they?
Yes, we'll microchip them when they're coming into the shelters, yes.
So that would go to the logic that most of the animals that you get are already microchipped by the animal shelter.
Quite a few.
Okay,
And if not, upon spay neuter, when we provide the surgery, we chip the animal.
okay. Terrific, thank you.
You're welcome.
And what's your success rate in terms of the animals that are transferred? How many of them you get back? How many of them wind up getting adopted?
Well, I specifically oversaw the transport program last year, and with over 2,200 animals transferred, I would say we took back maybe 5 to 10 total. If they're not a candidate for adoption in the transport partner, that's part of the contract that we sign with them, that they're required to return them to us, and we have to pay all expenses to bring them back. They stay at our facility until they're adopted. So if they need additional medical care or training support, we give them everything, just like we do with all of the animals that we pull from LA Animal Services, to ensure that we can find them a forever home.
But so almost none of them came back.
I would say 5 to 10, probably, in returns. Very few.
Not
compared to the-
percent, 5 to
Correct.
10
Not 5
animals.
to 10%, 5 to 10 animals.
Which is almost nothing, so that's really good.
We are very selective on the animals that we send for transport for that exact reason. Most of our transport partners send us a specific criteria of age, breed, any medical or behavior issues. They are specific to what they can handle, and we are very specific even within that criteria on what we'll send, because we want to prevent having to bring them back.
And I assume some things we have an overabundance of that they don't in other places in the country. Like every time the Beverly Hills Chihuahua does the sequel, we probably wind up with hundreds of additional Chihuahuas, and there are plenty of places in the country that probably have fewer than they could place rather than more. So
Unfortunately,
I assume those are
yes.
the kinds of opportunities we're making use of.
Correct. Most of the transport partners that we send animals to have waiting lists of people looking to adopt small dogs that otherwise would go to a pet store or breeder to purchase a small dog, where we have an overabundance here. So most of the time when the animals are transferred, within a week of being there, they're adopted, if not within the same day or two. So it's a very good success rate, and these communities are very proud to participate and help save the lives of dogs from Los Angeles.
That's really great. Now, the spay and neuter services provided by Best Friends, is this provided to anyone in the city, or is it focused on Council District 7 or the areas around?
Our spay-neuter clinic is open to the public, so not only do we provide spay-neuter surgeries for the animals that we pull from LA Animal Services that may not already be altered, but we provide surgery for any member of the public. Our discounts and our free surgeries are specified to specific zip codes, mostly District 7, and then there's a series of zip codes outside that are identified as low income throughout the city, that we offer low cost or most of the time free surgeries for both dogs and cats.
And that's based on the zip codes and the income levels.
Correct.
Okay. I know the goal originally was adopting out, I believe, 3,000 animals
Yes.
and doing 6,000 spay-neuter surgeries.
Correct.
How on target are we in terms of those goals?
So last year, we performed 3,570 private adoptions of LA Animal Services animals from that one facility, in addition to the transfer number, which I gave you, which was 2,239. So those animals ultimately were adopted once they were received by their final destination. And then for spay-neuter surgeries, we performed 6,183. 3,074 were animals that we pulled from LA Animal Services and put up for adoption. The other 3,109 were public clients. And I can give you a further breakdown if that's helpful. 1,488 of the 3,100 were actually free or discounted spay-neuter for District 7 residents.
Very good. Mr. O'Farrell, any other questions or comments?
Just one last one. Since you obtain animals from all the shelters, are there any particular shelters in the city that have the greatest, where you get the greatest number of animals?
Yes, we have a team of both staff and a very strong volunteer force. We focus our pulling efforts, so rescuing animals from the city shelters 7 days a week. I would say that primarily we focus our efforts on South LA, North Central, and East Valley shelters, which tend to have the highest intake rates. Very, very rarely do we pull from West LA, which also pulls from the other shelters for adoption. West Valley, very rarely. So North North Central, East Valley, and South LA primarily.
Yeah, those are our 3 largest shelters, yes.
Terrific. And how often do you, I get emails and messages from people that I know who pick up stray dogs all the time, and they're asking for help. Do your volunteers pick up stray dogs often as well, just on their way from one shelter to the next?
You know,
Running in the
maybe
street?
during admissions process? No, I wouldn't say so. And if they do, they know the protocol and what to do.
Rely
with
on
the
animal
Yeah.
services?
Yeah,
Yes.
take them to the shelter because we never know if an owner is out there searching for the animal. Just because they're stray, we can't assume that they are not owned by someone. So we have to do the due diligence of letting them be at the animal shelter for the stray hold and allowing a potential owner to reclaim them.
Any other questions?
No, thank you.
If not, I would note the presence of Councilmember Fuentes, and I don't know if you have any questions on item number 7,
Thank you
which
so
is...
much, Mr. Koretz. No, I don't have any questions, but I am present. Thank you.
And we were talking about good works of a shelter in your vicinity.
I know. Thank you.
If there are no other questions, we will note and file that report without objection. And now item number 8. Oh, wait. Actually, I missed it. My apologies. Public comment first. I didn't see the cards. Daniel Gus to be followed by Phyllis Dougherty, and then Susan Taylor.
Good afternoon, Daniel Gus from the Stand Foundation. On Friday, I added this letter to the public file. It's my letter to Ron Galperin, which I also filed with the District Attorney's Public Integrity Division today. I have an email from your Animal Services Commission President, David Zaft, who says that more than 5,000 animals who went from a cage in a city shelter to a cage at the Best Friends shelter were publicized as adoptions. Now, I don't know, to Mr. O'Farrell's point, I don't know how a charity adopts an animal, but the city has solicited hundreds of thousands of dollars in grants and donations from people's wills based on the city telling the public that more than 5,000 animals who went from one cage to another were adopted, and they weren't. And so I asked Mr. Galperin's office to look at it, and this letter, which is now part of the public file, is in the hands of Ann Ingalls in the district attorney's office. I have an email pertaining to point 1 from Mark Peralta of Best Friends in which he denies having animal services create false impound numbers. And I have an email here from Nicole Schwartzlander of Best Friends to a supervisor at West Valley. This is about 24 of it, about 700 false impound numbers that were generated. Best Friends took in hundreds of neonatal kittens without their first going through a city shelter. That is each one of those is a violation of their contract with the city. Of course, Ms. Barnett never disclosed that her daughter is employed by Best Friends. When you got a 1 in 1,200 response rate on the RFP to give away a $19 million city asset, and one way or the other, if the city continues to misrepresent that these 5,000 animals were adopted when they went from one cage to another, I'd rather that you fix it than me fix it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gus. Phyllis Dougherty.
Thank you, Phyllis Story, the Animal Issues Movement. It's the first time I've ever seen a report that supposedly audits the performance done by the agency itself. I mean, where is all the information that was given to you should have been provided in a spreadsheet that could be verified, and yet you're just taking someone's word for it. There was one error, I hate to correct Mr. Chavez, but you do not microchip the animals when they come in the shelter. They're not microchipped unless they've changed their policy very recently until they go out of the shelter, until they're adopted, because how would you microchip them? You don't have an owner. You want to microchip them to the owner, the new owner, and they pay for that. One thing that hasn't been mentioned is that No Kill LA or Best Friends pays $150 for every adoption that's supposedly in addition to the one the year before to rescues. So this is turned into a profit-making industry, and that's a payment, not a donation. Mr. Peralta clarified that for me. What you didn't ask, and what would be very interesting, is out of this total number of adoptions that have been done, how many dog licenses have been sold in the city of Los Angeles? What impact is that having on our local constituency or demographic of dogs here? Are people going out and getting them somewhere else, or are they actually going to Best Friends and filling their needs that way? Another thing is on these animals that are transported, she said that they go to the destination and then they are adopted. Are they adopted, or do they go to other rescues? That's a very, very important point. Just same way that they come here and then they go out again, are they going out from all these locations? Because another 72 went to the Northwest just the other day, and then it's going to be another 150. They don't have any animal shortages in these areas. Believe me, Oregon, Montana, even Washington, they don't have any dog shortages. So where are these animals really going?
Thank you. And last speaker on this item, Susan Taylor.
Hi, Susan Taylor, Actors and Others for Animals, and I'm here to speak about the transfers that Best Friends does, as well as the other organizations. I looked at the contract with Best Friends, and I've provided you all with information on all the attachments. But on page 10, it says that their transfers should be limited. I don't think 2,239 in 1 year. It doesn't take into effect whatever the New Hope animals transferred is limited. In addition, they said that the department lets New Hope and Best Friends vet these rescues where the animal goes, and I think there's an issue there. For example, one of the shelters that is transferred to Best Friends is the Green Hill Humane Society in Oregon, and I've attached to you a page of their statistics from the website for 2011 and 12, which was the only one available. It shows that they too transfer out animals. So I think we surely should not be transferring out animals to shelters who transfer out animals. I mean, this is a Ponzi-type scheme. The department, as I said, allows the rescues to vet them. Yet it also says in their the Best Friends contract on page 13 that with respect to animals being housed or transported to other municipalities or organizations, the city shall be solely responsible for organizing such transfers, and it goes on and on. I think we need to have a standardized way of transfers, and I think the only way we need to do that is to get all this information. I'm not really more at fault with Best Friends than the city of Los Angeles, because getting the statistics and getting all of this information out of the department is very difficult. I think that an audit needs to be done. And I just want to, I don't have time, I guess, but Maddie's Fund, Richard Avanzino once talked about how we should do adoptions, and it's on the letter there. I'm ending my time. But I think we should look at responsible adoptions, not just getting out all the animals out of the shelters.
Thank you. Although we have already voted the item, I would give the department a chance to respond to anything that you'd like to respond to. Okay. All right, thank you. Item number 8.
Item number 8, City Attorney Report relative to fee waivers for New Hope Partners and revised New Hope program.
Good afternoon. Dov Lassell, Assistant City Attorney. You have before you a report issued by our office. This is for the setting of fees for the New Hope partners. The program itself was approved by the commission and went to the City Council. City Council originally sent it back with the thought that this might require an ordinance change. We've reviewed it. It doesn't require an ordinance change. The LAMC already allows a waiver by the department's commission for the New Hope partners. This seems to fit squarely within that. and so I would recommend that this matter be noted and filed.
Now, what was the board's purpose in wanting to amend the waiver policy?
I think that that's really for the department.
If we could have the department answer that question.
John Chavez with the Department of Animal Services. What was the purpose for changing the policy, Councilman?
Yes.
There were both programmatic changes that were made to the policy. One was alluded to earlier where we wanted to give animals under the age of under 30 pounds a full weekend to be available to the public. That was one change. But we wanted to change the fee. Right now it's $40. I should note for the record that New Hope partners don't have to pay anything right now. We've gotten grants from both the ASPCA and from Best Friends to pay for the $40 spay and neuter deposit. We wanted to increase it to $50 to also allow us to pay for the microchips as well. So that was the reason that we made a recommendation to go from $40, which is just for a spay and neuter deposit, to a $50 flat fee, which can pay for sterilization and for the microchip.
And so you're not still asking for this currently, though, are you?
We are, we have it within the current municipal code to be able to waive, for instance, the adoption fee for dogs is $102. We can waive that down to $50, and we are fine with that approach per the city attorney's findings.
So you're not asking for any further change at this point?
No.
Okay. Any other questions, members?
Quick question, Mr. Chair. Does this subsidy that you mentioned that is currently in place for New Hope partners, will that subsidy continue?
Yes. We will be presenting the PAW committee with a donation from the ASPCA for $380,000 that will be coming to you as approved by the board. That would pay for the New Hope $40 spay and neuter deposit for the balance of the year. So that does continue. But yes, right now, New Hopes don't have to pay anything other than LA-based New Hopes have to pay the $5.50 dog tax license or tax. They still have to pay the $5.50.
And so once this flat fee is increased to $50, will they then pay the $10 balance, or will the subsidy pay out the full $50?
Subsidy will pay for everything.
Okay.
But that subsidy will only, it's only going to last for so long. At some point, the New Hope providers will have to pay for the $50, yes.
Mr. Fuentes, any questions, comments? Okay. Members of the public, Daniel Gus. Will be followed by Phyllis Doherty.
On the convergence of the issues here, this is a good thing to waive the fees, believe me, with the animals that my charity bails. But this is the convergence of the issues. You're being given, for example, $380,000 based on the city telling the ASPCA that you're doing a good job, that you're getting animals out, that they're being adopted. The problem is that these grants are going to be jeopardized when and if the city doesn't correct the fact that you're not getting these animals out. If the ASPCA finds out, and I don't want to write about it, I'm asking you to deal with it. In my letter, which is part of the last agenda item, you're representing to organizations like the ASPCA that this many animals are getting out, when in fact it's only this much. When you don't have integrity of your numbers, you're jeopardizing grants like this. We really do need these grants, because the more animals people like Sue and Phyllis and I get out, the lower your costs are going to be. But when you don't have integrity of your adoption numbers, people like the organizations like the ASPCA are going to think twice about giving grants like this. We need grants like this, which is why your numbers have to have more integrity. That's why you need an audit, because we don't want to lose donations like this. This in itself is a good idea, but don't jeopardize the grants with bogus numbers. Thank you.
Ms. Doherty? Oh. Thank you. So if there's no further comments, I would suggest that we note and file the city attorney's report, and we direct the department that with any further financial changes or fee waivers to the New Hope program, that first be approved by the CAO with a report to council, and that will allow the council or PAW committee at the request of council to determine whether to review the changes in the future. So we'll note and file the city attorney's report without objection.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item, item number 6.
Item number 6, Los Angeles Department of Building and Safety report and joint CAO and Chief Legislative Analyst report. Response to motion, Labange Weezer, relative to identifying and accounting for wood frame soft story residential buildings. This matter has also been referred to the Planning and Land Use Management Committee.
Council members, Roberto Mejia from the CLA's office. This item was approved by the Plum Committee, and it's a request for 3 position authorities to do the inventory for the soft story buildings in the city. In the report, in the joint report from the CAO, CLA, it denotes that there's approximately 29,000 of these properties in the city. The positions would be Reso Authority, and they are for 1 structural engineering associate, 3, and 2 building inspectors. And Jason Killeen from the CAO's office is here, as well as building and safety.
Are those 3 positions going to be able to handle that number of buildings?
My understanding is yes, and that the duration of the program will be 1 year.
Okay. And when's the program going to be initiated?
My understanding is as soon as possible, that those positions can be pulled off the list.
And this will also apply for the coming fiscal year as well, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Other questions, comments? No public comment cards. So if there's no further comments, we will approve the report without objection.
Thank you.
And then we'll go to item number 3.
Item number 3, City Attorney Report and Ordinance relative to amending the Los Angeles Administrative Code to add new section 4.310.1 to provide administrative guidelines and a waiver position for the Dependent Eligibility Program administered by the Personnel Department.
Deputy City Attorney Phyllis Henderson, Labor Relations Division. This report authorizes the Personnel Department to conduct a dependent eligibility verification of all dependents receiving public benefits. And once the verification has been done, if someone is determined not to be eligible dependent, that person will be removed. And it also provides for a waiver in that employees would not be required to pay the overpayments for those dependents. And this serves a substantial public purpose because of the amount of resources and time to verify the eligibility of those dependents.
So what makes one ineligible typically? What's a typical situation?
For instance, pursuant to the Affordable Care Act, a dependent who's 26 and over is no longer eligible to be on the parent's plan. Divorce can make a person ineligible, so that the spouse has to be removed from the plan. So if an employee does not report that they're divorced, so the city is still paying those benefits to that spouse. And so the verification program will require the employee to verify the current status of each of their dependents.
And my understanding is that obviously the reason we'd want to go forward is to stop paying out the amount of benefits that we're paying out to people that aren't eligible, but that we're also not going after back payments because of the potential hit on employee morale if we were to do that, et cetera.
Also, the cost of doing that, because you have to evaluate each claim, and you can only rescind coverage for fraud or material misrepresentation, and so it will take a lot of resources to do that as well as you will have to continue to pay those benefits pending any appeals, pending any investigation to see if those benefits need to be paid for the dependents.
So this is, in essence, an amnesty program.
Correct.
Any further comments from the department?
Yes, my name's Alex Vasquez. I'm with the Personnel Department. I think I'd just like to add that before we embarked on this program, we looked at other agencies that have done this verification process. We looked at other agencies such as CalPERS in Orange County, and their programs also contained a waiver component to the program. It's also to encourage employees to come forward and report any dependents that they have on their plan that are not that are no longer eligible. So it's also seen as a way to incentivize employees to come forward and report any ineligible dependents.
How'd they do in Orange County? Do you remember how much money they saved and how successful the program was in general?
I don't recall off the top of my head, but just in talking to Orange County and also CalPERS, they've been quite successful in removing a significant number of ineligible dependents. As far as our program, we are currently underway in our program, and so far approximately 75% of the employees who were required to submit documentation have already done so, and employees already have come forward and removed 299 ineligible dependents on their own.
Very good. Questions, comments, members?
Mr. Chair, that was my question as well. Any estimated, say the 338 to 676 ineligible covered dependents are removed, what's the approximate cost savings to the city?
Sure. So the approximate savings per dependent, it will vary, but just roughly, it's approximately $307 per month. So for that 299 that have been removed so far, on an annual basis, that would equate to $1.1 million savings approximately. After you discount what the program costs, which is about $300,000 to do this whole process, that's still quite significant. And like I said, we're still in the process. We still have 25% of the employees that need to respond to the verification process.
Thank you.
And on an ongoing basis, what will we do so we keep this up? Will we do more education to let people know what the ineligibility or eligibility requirements are, however you look at it?
Sure. So several things. I think one is we'll look to each year we require during open enrollment we do ask employees to look at and we do provide them a list of their dependents on their plan. This process has been very successful so far. I think we're going to look to what we did in this process to try to beef up our communications during open enrollment to remind employees that they should remove individuals that are ineligible. We'll also look at our practices to see what we can do to help employees be reminded or make it easy for them to remove ineligible dependents. For example, when they get a divorce, to automatically know to call us and let us know so that we can remove their ex-spouse. And I think we'll also look to ways we can automate the process as well. One of the things we are doing in this process that allows employees to upload their documents and submit them, our current process, our ongoing process doesn't allow that. So that's something that we'll look towards maybe upgrading our system to be able to allow employees to upload their documents and submit them electronically.
Have we done this before, or is this the first time?
This is the first time that we've done this. We did it on a small scale for a small group of employees, but this is the first large-scale process that we've done this. And we're going to look to maybe doing it periodically because it's been so successful so far.
Very good. Other questions, comments? If not, we will approve this item. And thank you for undertaking this. This is a good efficiency and savings for the city, so we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Item number 4.
Item number 4, motion, Englander, Bonin, Koretz, et al., relative to pension forfeiture by any member of the city's 3 pension systems who is convicted of a felony involving the use of their city employment position.
Good afternoon. I'm Senior Assistant Teresa Stamus with the City Attorney's Office. My colleague.
Alan Manning, Assistant City Attorney.
I wonder if you could tell us where this stands in the process and walk us through it a little bit.
So we're delighted to assist the council in preparing this ordinance. The motion provides us with policy direction in 2 important respects. First, that a employee upon a felony conviction would lose their entire pension. And secondly, that the felony conduct would pertain to the use of the employee's city position. There are a number of legal issues that will come into play depending on a number of circumstances. For instance, if this is something that's applied to current employees as well as prospective employees. And so we will also need to consult with our own city attorney colleagues, our labor relations division, to discuss meet and confer issues, if any. So I guess our advice to you at this point would be, we think that it would facilitate the decision-making and the different policy decisions that really need to go into the creation of this ordinance if we were able to lay out the different options, the legal implications of the different options, and report back to you with the report in the next 30 days or so.
That'd be great. And I'll let my colleagues ask any questions they might have first, then I have a few questions that I'd ask you to consider while you're in the process.
No questions at this time.
So you mentioned prospective employees. What would the scenario, a sample scenario, would look like in terms of sort of folks who are prospective employees who there's a challenge with this? How does that, I don't see that scenario playing out.
Just the basic premise in pension law is that it's much easier to apply new conditions of employment to people coming into the system than imposing new conditions to those who are already part of the pension system. So there's some legal challenges to doing that, and so we would want to discuss them with you.
Sure. And so help me understand sort of how you get past what I think is the inherent challenge of taking somebody's pension who's rightfully earned it before the moment of felonious activity. I mean, it seems to me that there's a moment in time where a felony is proven to have taken place. There's probably a moment in time that there's felonious activity. How can we legally go after somebody's complete pension prior to that? Now, I'm not sympathetic to folks who break the law under the color of sort of their authority, whether it's a council member allegedly or whether it's a building and safety inspector, whatever the case may be. I understand there's a real desire to punish those folks, but how do you get to somebody's pension prior to the felonious activity?
Well, this is one of the issues that we are in the process of researching. I know that the state measure does make that distinction.
That's the one that was proposed by the governor when the legislature did, because I introduced legislation that went precisely after this point in folks who have sort of, elected officials who have any sort of felonious activity and a subsequent conviction. My legislation didn't make it through, but the governor incorporated elements of it into what would become part of our pension reform. But I think the way they reconciled that is that they looked at sort of the felonious activity forward. I don't know that we can go backwards. And so the motion, at least the way I read it, speaks to trying to make it so that folks have to surrender their complete pension. And I don't know that that is legal, nor would it be fair.
Well, we don't either, and that is one of the issues that we were going to be researching and coming back to you with a report on.
Sure. Is there other jurisdictions who have moved towards this type of legislation and/or law? I imagine that the state law trumps any action that we would have, but am I mistaken? Does the charter give us any sort of special ability to go after people's pension than other jurisdictions would?
Well, under the state constitution, PEPRA does not apply to the city. So we are in the position really of deciding what laws we want to apply in the city in this area.
And in terms of sort of what a conviction is, I'm not an attorney, but I imagine that there are sort of gradients of felonies, and at what point do you all decide, whether it's a wobbler or the type of sort of code that's violated to say that it's enough for somebody to lose a portion or all of their pension?
Well,
How will you all make that sort
Well,
of
we're hoping not to
determination?
have to reinvent the wheel, and there is state law. There's also forfeiture provisions in other cities. I was just, because we have started looking into this and doing some research, came across Pennsylvania, which conviction, in the definition, for instance, they include pleading, pleads or no defense, or pleads guilty or no defense to any listed crime, and then they actually list the crime. So there's we have to go on looking at different states and jurisdictions and seeing what they did, and borrowing those and using the same language and proposing it back to you so that you can see also how that was approached in other states and jurisdictions.
Is there a distinction between elected and non-elected officials?
Well, there can be, but the state forfeiture laws apply to both.
I see. And in terms of folks who, let's say, are technically receiving their pensions, as a result they're retired, and we pass this law, would that have an effect on those folks who are currently enjoying their pension benefits? Let's say we adopt the ordinance and you've got somebody who is in the criminal proceedings right now, and they are deemed to be a felon at the conclusion of those legal proceedings. At what point does this law sort of take effect? Let's say we pass it 2 years from now, but somebody gets tried for something a year prior to that. Do we have the ability to go back? It's not quite ex post facto. I get that, but I mean it's...
Well, I think that you would have an ex post facto problem with that. I think one thing that you probably would be able to do is say that, for example, if somebody commits a particular felony and that's covered under the ordinance that you adopt, that even if the conviction comes after the person is retired, but if the actual act occurs after you've adopted the ordinance, that
would be exposed.
Well, that would not.
That would not.
That would not be.
I see. Okay.
As long as the law is in existence at the time that the person commits the act, I think that you probably would have a good case for having it apply to that person.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you obviously have a lot of legal fine points that you'll have to deal with. Whether let's say the case of Bell, for instance. I don't know if you've looked at what they're doing and whether they're attempting to undertake something similar, but they obviously had a city manager that gave himself a criminally high pension. Do they get to go back and invalidate that? Since obviously the crime of having too high a salary is directly related to the fact that he's going to have an enormous pension as well based on that salary. Have they done anything, if you looked at what they've done?
Well, I don't think that really is directly applicable to what we're doing. But that will be, we're going to be looking at all aspects of this as we prepare the report for you.
Seems like the best example I can think of, actually.
We got one here.
Which one?
Well, I mean, I don't think that would apply because we've got so much sort of civil protection to decide sort of what the salaries are. So we should not ever have a position where we've got
here.
pensions that are outrageous and that sort of. So the checks and controls are. So I think it'd be unique to other cities. I mean, thank goodness for the charter.
So, do we know though what constitutes a vested right and when? So, whether you could take the whole pension, whether it only applies to once the crime occurred, if it occurred over a lengthy period of time, as in the Bell case, where the person paid himself a criminally high salary for an extensive period of time, just
Well,
as an example.
What's key again is that if it's done on a prospective basis, you can draft the ordinance however you like. You can decide that you want the forfeiture to occur from the date of the commission of the crime, or to have it more onerous and have it be forfeited entirely. We do want to look at the legalities of all of that, but the point is that barring any legal impediments, that's more of a policy decision as to how stringent you want the ordinance to be and the forfeiture to be.
I'm going to assume, although it's perhaps my own opinion, that we'd probably want to make it as stringent as possible. The bigger question is what you can do and what holds up legally.
And that is the more focused then on whether we're talking for new hires or current employees.
Yeah, new hires, I would assume, is a much easier thing to justify. I know we always have this problem with different things being a vested right or not a vested right for current employees. What about situations where someone's committed a felony while they're in the city employ, but the felony itself is not directly related to their job? Are we looking at covering that as well, or not covering that?
Well, I think that the motion itself wasn't the motion limited to job-related felonies. So I'm not sure how much further than the motion you would like us to look.
So you're not planning on looking. You're not looking at that currently.
Well, the broader you try to make it, the more difficulties you will have in enforcing it and having a court allow you to enforce that. The broader and vaguer you make it, the less likely it will be to be enforced.
And do you know whether the employees' contributions to the pension system would be returned to them if we invalidated their pension?
I'm sure that would have to be an element of it.
And would we have to pay interest on it? Do we know?
That's, we've started this research. That's an open question right now that we are researching. As Mr. Manning said, it does seem that refunding of the contributions would be necessary. However, as part of this, we are looking at other jurisdictions, seeing what's being done there. And in Pennsylvania, as I mentioned, they require that any restitution be paid out of the contributions. So we'll, again, if we can see if these would be valid components of the ordinance in California, and our research seems that they would be, then we can always present options and with it assign any legal risk or issues that you should also be cognizant of.
So you'll bring this back to us presumably with those questions answered. You thought 30 days would be a reasonable amount?
Yes.
Yeah, 30 to 40, somewhere in there.
Well, why don't we give
As
you...
we've talked, more issues have come up.
Why don't we give you 45 days and ask you to come back at the first council meeting after 45, first committee meeting after the 45 days. Without objection, that'll be the direction.
So we'll hold this at committee pending the report back?
Hold the committee and schedule it after the 45-day period has passed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item number 5.
Item number 5, CAO report in response to motion, Englander Wesson, relative to staffing for the 2014 Special Olympics Summer Games Invitational and 2015 Special Olympics World Series. This matter has also been referred to the Budget and Finance Committee.
Good afternoon, Anne Marie Sauer with the CAO. The 2015 Special Olympics World Games will be held in LA during the summer of 2015. The police department notes that this will be a significant event of national importance to the city and an event requiring considerable amount of planning and coordination. Prior to next year's Special World Olympic Games, the 2014 Special Olympics Summer Games Invitational will be held here in June of this year. The June event will serve as a precursor to the 2015 World Games. Activities for the 2015 World Games will commence in July of 2015 when 7,000 athletes, 3,000 coaching staff members representing 170 countries arrive in Los Angeles, and there are also more than 90,000 spectators expected. The last time this event was in the United States was in 1999 in Raleigh, North Carolina. The police and fire departments are requesting resolution authority positions as part of a full-time planning group for the 2015 World Games. The police department has requested 1 commander, 1 management analyst 2, and 1 secretary as part of their Special Olympics planning group within the Office of Operations. The fire department originally requested 3 positions and has subsequently revised its request. They are now requesting 2 positions, 1 fire battalion chief and 1 fire inspector 1 for their emergency operations division. Both departments have additional staff that will augment the full-time staffing on a as-needed and part-time basis. The CAO's office recommends the resolution authority for the 5 positions, so this would be a change from our report because we initially had the 6, so it would be just the 2 in the fire department for the duration of this fiscal year and for all of next year. There isn't funding for this year or next year provided in the current budget or the proposed budget, or actually in terms of the Budget and Finance Committee recommendations on the proposed budget. So there isn't funding, so the departments would be expected to absorb the costs. The police department is attempting to designate this as a national security special event that could potentially allow the city to be reimbursed for the personnel costs, but that hasn't been determined at this point. But the police and fire departments and I are available to answer any questions.
Do you have any idea, or does the LAPD have any idea how soon they'll know if the federal government is going to reimburse the costs?
Good afternoon, Mike Williams. We don't know that, Council Member, at this point. There has to be some additional planning to take place before we can submit that request. This event is actually going to be more significant than the 1984 Olympics in that we have additional security concerns, logistical concerns, housing concerns, transportation concerns, and et cetera. One of our biggest concerns is that we can not, at this point, make this responsibility an ancillary responsibility for a current commander because of the 17 commanders that we have in the department that are budgeted. We're tasked with specific assignments that, to be quite frank with you, require probably about anywhere from 70 to 80 hours of work personally every week. So if we're going to ensure the successful and safe Olympics, Special Olympics, we have to have that position for the commander and certainly for the 2 assistants. All the other, as Anne-Marie noted, all the other positions will be bled off from our existing staff within the police department to support those 3 individuals.
Now, this is obviously a pretty massive task. How is the CAO's office anticipating that we actually fulfill this without funding? Are we looking at taking a look sometime early next fiscal year at whether we can find a source of funding early in the budget cycle?
Basically, we'd be looking, because this did come up as part of the recent budget discussions, but funding was not allocated. So basically, we'd be looking at it and reporting back during the financial status report. So we'd look at the department's salaries accounts as part of the quarterly financial status reports and report there on any shortfalls. But there isn't, as far as I know, besides the potential federal funding, there isn't other funding that we're aware of at this point.
Why not just take it up now? Why are we delaying it for a period of time?
Well, like I said, it did come up during the budget and finance discussions, but funding wasn't allocated. So, I mean, it wasn't something that was included in the mayor's budget, and then there was a budget memo that addressed this that we did discuss, but there was not a decision made at that time, obviously, just last week, to put that in.
I mean, do we think we'll be okay dealing with this with the first FSR? Because we obviously are going at some point to have to create some of these positions and fund them.
Well, right.
Otherwise, we have a an hour or so, we can write a motion and we could try to deal with it tomorrow if we think we need to.
Right, and if we do that, I mean, basically the situation is just that if funding is going to be allocated, it's going to have to be, identified from somewhere. So there isn't funding when the budget was being put together that was identified for this. I mean, so the positions, again, we're supportive of, and certainly we would hope that, the federal funding could potentially come through, but like I said, at this point, I'm not aware of any other potential funding sources that we could use.
Do you think we find that out by the time we hear the first FSR, whether federal funding is going to come or not?
I don't believe so. I don't think it's going to happen that quickly. It's the federal government. They don't, as you well know, they don't move that quickly.
Okay. Members, other questions? We have one member of the public to speak, Daniel Guss, who's going to pass on this. Let me see. So I guess, although I'm somewhat uncomfortable about it, I guess we can pass on this item, and actually maybe we should ask this to be referred to the CLA to analyze this and bring a report back to us at the beginning of the coming fiscal year.
Councilmember, we'd be glad to do that. We have reviewed the report, and for now we do agree with the CAO's recommendations. As the CAO mentioned, that this will be followed and tracked in the FSR. Given the size of the fire department's budget and the police budget, if they do encounter shortfalls in their budgets next year, it's likely to be more. It wouldn't be a result of these three positions. It would likely be other items that would be included in there.
Well, I think it's probably fair to say the fire department's budget is a little more to the bone, so I'd be concerned about both, but particularly on that end. And I think they clearly do need to provide these services. So
yes.
Why don't we ask for a report back from the CLA at the time of the first FSR, and give us the status then of the ability to pay, and whether at that time we have a sense of whether we're getting any federal funding as well. So that would be my recommendation. If there's no objection.
Chair will be holding this in committee pending that report?
Yes. I would hold it. Well, unless that causes you problems, which it may. Okay.
In order for the departments to have the position authorities, we would need it to move forward. It is also referred to Budget and Finance Committee, so we would hope that you would at least approve the position authorities, or at least I'm sure the Police and Fire Department would like that.
All right. We'll approve those authorities and ask for a report to come back prior to the first FSR with the status that I've suggested.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And what is left? Is it only item number 9? Okay, let us do item number 9 then.
Item number 9, motion Boscaino Englander relative to requesting the city attorney to prepare and present an ordinance to amend Los Angeles Municipal Code Sections 61.07 and 64.70 to ensure that the new job classification of environmental compliance investigators of the Bureau of Sanitation's Watershed Protection Division has the same authority and liability protection as the previous job classifications.
Good afternoon, Ted Jordan, Assistant City Attorney.
Good afternoon, Shahram Karagani, Watershed Protection Manager, Bureau of Sanitation.
I can just give a brief overview. The motion will ask my office to prepare an ordinance to essentially update 2 provisions in the municipal code that mischaracterize our environmental compliance inspectors in that classification as industrial waste inspectors. That's simply an old designation. It also refers to their older division, the Stormwater Management Division in the Bureau of Engineering, which is now the Watershed Protection Division in the Bureau of Sanitation. So this motion, which we've sort of had assistance in taking a look at ahead of time, will seek to update the code to properly classify the environmental compliance inspectors as public officers, conferring upon them the arrest authorities under the California Penal Code and providing them the protections thereunder. Essentially provides all of these changes as a way to put the code in the position that it really should already be in. It would also, as we envision it, clarify that they would also have the status of illegal dumping enforcement officers following an agreement with the police department as reflected in the penal code.
So could you briefly explain the Levan injunction and what its connection is to this?
Well, the Levan injunction, it arises out of the lawsuit brought by the homeless individuals in the Skid Row area. It's not really directly before you under this agenda. However, the work being done down in Skid Row and in other areas where there are homeless individuals is work that is being done by our environmental compliance inspectors. So the change that we are talking about here would assist the individuals that are directly impacted in that Levan case in terms of the city staff that have to deal with homeless encampments.
Any employee relations issues that would result from this ordinance, the changes?
I am not aware of any.
No, I'm not aware. This is minor technical adjustment to just to the LAMC to bring them up to date.
My understanding is these code provisions date from the mid-90s, and we're trying to get the code up to date.
Yes, and Matthias Parfum from CLA, the MOUs that were approved, the latest ones for EAA, they did include some language that does address this ordinance that will be approved for the additional work that these employees would be doing. The latest agreement with EAA does cover that work.
Okay, so that's already anticipated.
It is, yeah.
Any questions, comments?
Oh, the correction, if you have an
Yeah,
All right, still have a member of the public to hear.
Oh, I see, okay.
So, John Larson.
Good afternoon, John Larson, Council District 15, Legislative Deputy for Councilman Joe Buscaino. We are indeed supportive of this motion because we believe in our conversations with sanitation, with EAA, and with the city attorney and with the police department. This will not only help us clarify some older code, but also take a big step forward in allowing us to safely, securely manage our homeless encampment cleanup efforts without running further afoul of any litigious issues that so far have made these proceedings extremely difficult. We are also supportive of the technical changes being proposed by sanitation to the motion. We see no particular issues with those, and we look forward to this issue moving forward.
Thank you. And do I need to read these changes into the record? They're fairly brief.
That would be
okay. So the amendments would amend sections 61.07 and 64.70 of the LA Municipal Code to say A, in accordance with the California Penal Code, section 830.7J, authorize the powers of arrest with peace officer status for all environmental compliance inspectors in the Bureau of Sanitation. Number B, update job titles of the Industrial Waste Inspector Classification Series to reflect the current job titles of an Environmental Compliance Inspector, Senior Environmental Compliance Inspector, and Chief Environmental Compliance Inspector. And C, update the name of Stormwater Management Division of the Bureau of Engineering to Watershed Protection Division of the Bureau of Sanitation. And with those technical amendments, I'd ask that we approve this item without objection.
no objection.
So we now have a couple of public comments from the general public. Phyllis Doherty, to be followed by Daniel Gus.
Phyllis Story with the Animal Issues Movement. I want to clarify one thing that was said earlier about, and it's not a problem, but that animal issues that we are a rescue organization that utilize the New Hope benefits. No, we never have. Anything we take out of the shelter, we pay full price. We always have. Even if we're asked to take the animal, we pay full price. There's some issues that I think that you should be aware of. About 2 months ago, Mark Salazar came to the commission meeting and announced that they had taken in $20,000 in 1 month in licensing. That's a huge amount of money, considering that they're going out in the middle of the day when people are working and so forth. Well, it came to light through another report, internal report, that about half of those are being canceled because they're all being done on credit cards. So by the time the officers got back, the monies, well, people didn't mind that they didn't mind, but they were canceling them. So the money was not coming to the city after all. He was supposed to come back with a new report the following month. Well, he said that they had done 1,103 licenses in March, and that's apparently the figure. In April, he was supposed to come back and give another report on this really great $20,000 income. It was down to 784. Between the 1st of May and the 15th of May, it hadn't even reached 100. And that happened because what they were doing is counting every year that the animal was delinquent as a new license. So if you hadn't licensed for 6 years, that animal was counted as 6 licenses. So now that they're having to do it honestly, we're finding out that it's like 100. And he says they're changing their procedure. He did not announce to the commission why, but this is why. And I would suggest that you do a lot of checking. I don't know if you recall, Mr. Salazar really has no animal control experience. When he came here, he was brought in as a top manager while he had been released for administrative leave from Riverside for claims of sexual harassment and so forth, discrimination, a lawsuit which was settled.
Thank you. Mr. Gus?
By the way, Mr. Salazar was twice dismissed, also from his job in Texas, for similar harassment jobs, and in each instance, the employees were reinstated after Mr. Salazar was shown the door. Anyway, my article from City Watch LA about your improved elephant law. I wrote an elephant editorial in the Daily News back in October. I never heard any objections from your offices, so when the law was improved this time around, I could only go based on what I had. If we have better lines of communication, I understand from Mr. O'Farrell's office that there is some misunderstanding about this. If we had a better line of communication, I would better be able to represent your position on those issues. Similarly, I don't know if you're aware, but in Nuri's Martinez's district, an auto body shop with filthy fluids flowing towards an intact unlicensed pit bull, a second dog, third dog, fourth dog, fifth dog, and a sixth one. The city of Los Angeles issued dog breeder permits for this filthy and overcrowded business. A pit bull breeder's license for $335 within walking distance of Best Friends. The city issued a Chihuahua breeding license for $360, and I guess that'll be the subject of an upcoming article. But why in the world are we giving breeder licenses for pit bulls and chihuahuas? We kill more pits and chihuahuas than any other type of dog, and a filthy, overcrowded business. If I don't see responses from your offices, I can only assume that you explicitly or implicitly approve of that. I can only go by what I see. Just so you know, Mr. Krikorian sent out an email the other day about dogs in overheated cars, and he referred his constituents to the Humane Society, not LA Animal Services, no link, and he used Humane Society as a proper noun. So it's great that he sent this out, but please ask your colleagues to refer people to LA Animal Services. I'll be glad to give you this copy if you'd like. If you want the information about the licenses, let me know, and you can investigate that. Thank you for the extra time.
And with no other items before us, we are adjourned.